There are exactly 3 kinds of stupid decisions a man can make in the northern wilds. 1. Stepping out into a blizzard. 2. Saving someone from the race your people have been fighting for generations. 3. Doing both at the same time. My name is Riven Marr, a logger and trapper on the edge of Frostmere Forest. I don't have any war stories to tell, no medals to pin on my chest, just a one-room wooden cabin tucked against the trail and an old principle my mother drilled into my head when I was a kid. Don't let someone die if you can stop it. The storm hit like an angry god. Not just snow, it was the kind of cold that bites into your bones from the inside, the kind that makes every breath feel like swallowing knives. I should have stayed inside, barricaded the door, tended the fire, and pretended I couldn't hear the wind howling. But 3 days earlier, old Marta from the neighboring homestead had stopped by with her usual bundle of hard bread and gossip. She'd seen tracks heading toward Whitevale Lake. "Big ones," she'd said, squinting at me with those eyes that missed nothing. "Bigger than a pot. Not deer, not wolf." And me, cursed with that meddlesome streak, had gone to check. Maybe it was boredom, or maybe it was the way Marta's voice had trembled just a little. Either way, here I was, trudging through the whiteout, my boots sinking into drifts that came up to my knees. The northern wilds aren't kind to fools. This is the borderland between human settlements and orc territories, where the peace treaty is just ink on paper and old grudges run deeper than the frozen rivers. Orcs kill humans, humans kill orcs. That's the unwritten law. I've heard the story since I could walk. Green-skinned savages raiding villages, tusked warriors leaving nothing but ash. My mother used to tell them to scare me straight, but she always added her twist. "Hate the fight, not the fighter, Riven. We're all just trying to survive." She died 5 years ago, taken by a fever that no healer could touch. Left me the cabin, her principles, and a quiet life I didn't mind. No family left, no ties to the villages down south. Just me, my axe, and the forest. I liked the silence until days like this when it felt too heavy. Whitevale Lake appeared like a ghost through the storm, a vast sheet of white, not from fresh snow, but from ice so thick and hard it looked like polished stone. The wind whipped across it, carrying flakes that stung my face like needles. I crouched at the edge, scanning the cracks that had frozen over again. That's when my heart stopped. Green. Not the pale green of a frozen corpse, but a living green, like spring grass pushing through a graveyard in winter, a body trapped in the ice from the waist down. The upper half slumped forward as if it had given up, black hair matted in icy clumps around the face. Armor, not makeshift, but real. Metal plates etched with patterns, sharp edges catching the faint light filtering through the blizzard. An orc, a female orc. Every instinct screamed, "Turn away. Orcs kill people. People kill orcs." That's the law. The treaty might hold the clans back from full war, but out here, alone, no one would blame me for walking on. Captains in the border patrols would probably pat me on the back for it. I backed up 3 steps, turned around, took 7 more, and stopped. My mother's voice echoed in my head, harsh as dry wood. "Don't let someone die if you can stop it. Especially when they're helpless." "Damn it," I muttered, my breath torn away by the wind. I turned back, drew my axe, and knelt at the ice's edge. The ice didn't want to let her go. I hacked with the axe, pried with 2 knives, and scraped with my bare hands, chipping away at the fractured section bit by bit, like mining stone. An hour later, my hands were bleeding from the cold and the jagged edges. Finally, the ice gave way with a crack that echoed like thunder. I hooked She came free like a dead weight, nearly pulling me face first into the lake. She was heavy, heavier than any man I'd carried. Under the armor, muscles like ropes. I'd heard orcs were strong, but she felt more like a warhorse than a woman. If she lived long enough to wake, she could probably snap me in half like a twig. I hefted her onto my shoulder anyway. The trek back to the cabin was a nightmare. Wind tore at my cloak. Snow blinded me, but then my cabin loomed out of the white like a miracle made of logs and desperation. I kicked the door open, staggered inside, and dumped her near the hearth before slumping against the wall, remembering how to breathe. She lay there, still cold, silent, like a statue carved from green stone. And I knew, from this moment I'd drag trouble home. I knew hypothermia. Anyone living alone in the northern wilds does, unless they want to die from one cold night. I'd saved myself twice, pulled a lost traveler through once, but never an orc. Still, the rules were the same. Warm them slow, not fast. Keep them dry. Keep them breathing. Keep your own heart from panicking. She lay there on the floor near the hearth, her green skin pale under the ice crystals still clinging to her. I stripped off her armor piece by piece. The clasps were fine metal, the leather straps thick. This wasn't My fingers were numb from the cold, fumbling with each hook. Underneath was a simple wrapped cloth, soaked and frozen stiff. I replaced it with 3 of my spare blankets. That meant I'd be cold tonight, but she'd be less dead, and I told myself it was a fair trade. I stoked the fire higher, boiled water, and cooked a thin stew from the rabbit I'd trapped 2 days back. It wasn't much, mostly broth with scraps of meat and roots. Hours passed with just the wind battering the walls and the fire crackling. Near midnight, she made a low groan. Not quite pain, not yet awake. Her eyelids fluttered. I leaned down, speaking to someone who might not hear. Easy. You're safe. You're not dead. Not yet, at least. By morning, I dozed off against the wall, my neck twisted at an angle I knew I'd regret for a week. I woke to fast movement. Too fast. When I opened my eyes, she was sitting up, blankets wrapped around her like a cloak, and in her hand was my axe. The blade pointed straight at me, steady and true like someone who knew how to use it. Her eyes were gold like a wolf's, bright and sharp. The look in them was pure suspicion, enough to kill a weak-willed man just by existing. "Where am I?" Her voice rasped like it hadn't been used in days. I raised my hand slow. Real slow. "In my cabin. I pulled you out of the ice. You were dying." "Safe?" she echoed, like the word was foreign. "A human, telling an orc she's safe. Funny." The axe didn't lower. "What do you want?" I blinked. "I want you not to split my skull with my own axe." She stared at me like she was weighing if I was lying or playing some game. I just stood still, letting the exhaustion in my eyes speak for me. "Why did you save me?" she asked. "Because you were dying," I said. Not an answer. "It's the only one I've got." We stared at each other. Outside, the storm had eased to steady snow, still deadly, just quieter. Finally, she lowered the axe a fraction, not out of reach. "You're either brave," she said, "or stupid." I've heard folks lean toward the second. Something like amusement flickered across her face. Quick enough I wasn't sure. She glanced around my cabin, the rough wooden table, the single chair, the pile of hides for a bed, a few tools, no decorations, no luxuries. This was survival, not living. "You're poor," she said like a fact, not an insult. "You're observant," I replied, my voice dry. She looked back at me. "Name?" "Riven." She paused a beat. Short, but I was sharp enough to notice it was a consideration. Then she said, "Vesha." The name sounded strange and beautiful in the orc way, short, hard, with a whisper of wind. I didn't ask more. I just turned to the fire, ladled stew into my only wooden bowl, the one that was cracked, patched with tree resin. I handed it to her. She took it like it was gold, stared at it a long while before drinking. "Bad stew," she said. "I never claimed to be a cook." She closed her eyes, sipping slow. "But it's the best thing I've tasted in weeks." I watched her then, under the muscles in the predator eyes. She was exhausted, the kind of tired that didn't come from one night in ice, but from a longer journey. She lay back, pulling the blankets to her chin, and slept. And I sat by the fire, looking at the cracked wooden bowl on the table, wondering what I'd brought into this tiny cabin. The storm didn't end in a day. It dragged on for 3 like a curse. 3 days, I kept the fire going, boiled water, checked her breathing like checking a trap line. She slept. When awake, we talked careful, like 2 people walking on thin ice, one wrong word and everything cracks. She asked about my life. I asked about hers. We both gave truths. Just enough. I told her I lived alone since my mother died 5 years back because I'm used to it. I didn't say I'd tried living with someone once and failed because I couldn't stand the noise. She didn't say why alone or why her armor was so finely made. By the third day, she was strong enough to stand and pace the cabin. She was tall, had to duck slightly under the beams. The way she moved reminded me of a tamed beast, cautious, controlled, but ready to explode if needed. "Your cabin is small," she observed. "Efficient," I said. She looked at me long and said, like tossing out a fact, "You fear me." I didn't deny it. "You're twice my size. Fear's normal." "I could," she said matter-of-fact, "but I won't." "Glad to hear it." This time she smiled real, a rough laugh, unused but genuine, and that laugh made the cabin feel less cold. After the storm cleared, she should have left, but she didn't. Days turned to a week, the week to 2. We fell into a strange rhythm that felt natural, like it was meant to be. Mornings, I'd chop wood. She'd stand at the door watching, say, "Muscles still weak," even though I saw her strength returning day by day. Afternoons, I'd check traps. She'd stay back boiling water and mending her leather straps. Evenings, we'd eat together. Since I had only one bowl, it passed between us like a ritual. She told of Iron Peak Mountains where the cold made the northern wilds look like child's play, of learning to fight before reading, of a culture where weakness was death. I told of my mother, the one who taught survival with discipline and a hard heart, of how my people told orc monster stories to scare kids, of how I hated those stories but grew up in them. "We tell monster stories about you," I said one night. "We tell stories about weak, treacherous, dying like insects." Great, very diplomatic. Orcs aren't known for diplomacy. There were moments I realized the madness of it, a human and an orc, lifelong enemies sharing a cabin and bad stew. But it was happening, and the longer it went, the more the enemy part blurred. One afternoon, I came back to find Vesha holding the wooden bowl, turning it in her hands. "This bowl is old," she said, "cracked. It was and it still works." She looked at the crack, then at me. "It's cracked because it's used. It's ugly because it's real." I didn't know bowls had philosophy. "Not the bowl," she said softly. "You." I didn't understand right away, but those words stuck like a soft thorn in my mind. The day stretched, and something shifted. I'd catch her watching me chop wood. Not with once when I came back from traps with a fresh rabbit, she took it from my hands. Our fingers brushed, rough skin on rough skin, and neither of us pulled away quick. That touch lingered in my head longer than it should. Evenings by the fire, we'd sit closer than necessary. The cabin was small, sure, but not that small. She'd talk about the stars over Iron Peak, how they guided warriors home. I'd tell her about the trails in Frostmere, how the forest whispered warnings if our voices filled the space, chasing out the silence I'd always clung to. One night, after a particularly bad stew, I'd burned the roots. She pushed the bowl back to me with a smirk. "You cook like a child." "You eat like you're starving," I shot back. "I was," she said quieter, "before you." That hit me. I looked at her across the fire, the gold in her eyes catching the flames. She wasn't just strong, she was carrying something heavy, something she hid behind that warrior mask. And me? I was starting to see her not as an orc, but as Vesha, the one who'd laughed at my jokes, mended my torn cloak without asking, shared stories that made the cold outside feel farther away. 2 weeks in, the snow started to ease, but she didn't mention leaving. Neither did I. Mornings, I'd wake to find her already up, stoking the fire. "Lazy human," she'd tease, but there was no bite in it. Afternoons, she'd join me on short walks, testing her legs, she said, but we'd end up talking about nothing, the way snow muffled sounds or how rabbits outsmarted traps. One day out in the woods, she stopped sudden, hand on my arm. "Quiet," she whispered. A deer crossed our path, unaware. We watched it go, her grip lingering a second too long. When she let go, I felt the absence. "Why do you live alone, Riven? No clan, no mate?" I poked the logs, buying time. "Clans are for villages, I'm better out here, and mates, tried once, didn't stick." "Why?" "Too quiet," she said, "too stuck in my ways." Vesha nodded slow. "In Iron Peak, alone means weak, but you're not weak. You're choosing it." "Or it's choosing me," I muttered. She looked at me then, really looked. "Choice is strength. Even if it's hard, That night, as we shared the bowl, passing it back and forth, our fingers brushing more than accidental, I felt the blur sharpen into something else, not enemies, not strangers, something in between, warm like the fire, fragile like the ice we'd broken. 3 weeks in, the rhythm felt permanent. But nothing is in the wilds. One afternoon, heavy footsteps echoed from the eastern woods, many feet purposeful. I froze mid-chop, axe in hand. Vesha stood at the door, her face going still like prey scenting a predator. "Vesha," I said quick, dropping the axe, "you have to tell me." The footsteps grew louder, crunching snow. Vesha's stance changed, straighter, colder, like an invisible crown settling on her head. "They're here," she said, "and now you'll know who I am." Before I could ask what she meant, the door was pushed wider. 3 orcs filled the frame, massive silhouette. The leader was the biggest, scarred across one shoulder, his armor heavy with iron plates and bone talismans. His eyes swept the cabin like a battlefield, landing on me with open suspicion. The other 2 flanked him, hands resting on the hilts of their axes. The moment they saw Vesha, all 3 dropped to one knee in the snow, heads bowed. "Nu vuong qua chung ta," the scarred one rumbled in thick common tongue. "We have found you." The words hit me like a falling tree. Nu vuong. Queen. My mind reeled, trying to fit the pieces, the fine armor, the way she spoke of Iron Peak like it was hers, the exhaustion that went deeper than a single night in the ice. Vesha. Vesha wasn't just a warrior, she was their queen. I stared at her, mouth dry. Vesha. She didn't look at me. Not yet. Her voice, when she spoke, was cold steel. "Rise, Therok. Report." The scarred orc stood but kept his eyes lowered. "Your absence has caused unrest, my queen. The clans argue over succession. Some whisper you are dead. Others claim betrayal. We tracked your trail for 27 days. The Bloodhowl clan grows bold. They say the throne is empty. 27 days, nearly a month. I'd kept her alive for nearly a month, sharing my only bowl, my blankets, my fire, and all that time, she'd been a queen. Therok's gaze flicked to me, sharp as a blade. "This human, did he harm you, imprison you?" Vesha finally turned to me. Her golden eyes held something I couldn't read, regret, maybe, or the weight of a decision. "No," she said, voice firm. "He saved me from the ice. He kept me alive when I should have died." Therok's hand tightened on his axe. A human saving an orc? Mercy from our enemy? He must want something, gold, information, your head is a trophy. "I want her to live," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. My hands were empty, but every instant the other 2 orcs shifted, muttering in their tongue. Therok stepped forward, towering over me. "You expect us to believe that? After generations of blood between our peoples?" Vesha raised a hand, and silence fell instantly. "Enough. He speaks truth. I owe him a life debt." The words hung heavy in the small cabin. Life debt. I'd heard the term in old trader stories, sacred among orcs, unbreakable. Saving her had bound her to me in ways I didn't understand. Vesha turned fully to me then. "Riven, we must speak alone." Therok hesitated, his eyes narrowing on me like I was prey. "My queen, outside," she commanded. The 3 orcs backed out, but not far. I could feel their stares through the open door. The cabin felt smaller than ever. Vesha stood before me, blankets still draped over her shoulders like a makeshift cloak. For the first time, I saw the queen in her, the way her presence filled the space, the quiet authority that— "I lied to you," she said softly. "My name is Vexara, queen of the Iron Peak clans." I swallowed hard, the words landing like stones. "Why?" "Because I wanted to be Vesha, just Vesha, not the symbol they carry into war, not the one who decides who lives and who dies for thousands. For a few weeks I wanted to be a person, someone who could sit by a fire and share a cracked bowl without fear of what it meant." Her golden eyes searched mine. "If you had known, would you still have pulled me from the ice? Would you have given me your blankets, your food, your warmth?" I thought about it. Really thought. The fear that had gripped me that first night. The old stories of orc raids. The way my people whispered green devil like a curse. I don't know. I admitted, my voice rough. I might have been too scared, might have walked away, but I hope I wouldn't have. I hope I'd still have done the right. She nodded slowly, like she'd expected the honesty. That is why I didn't tell you. I wanted to see the man, not the fear. Outside, Tharok cleared his throat loudly. My queen, we must return. The clans fracture without you. Bloodhowl already gathers warriors. Vexara's shoulders tensed. She reached out, her large hand closing gently around mine. Her touch was warm now, strong but careful. I must go. My people need their queen, but I take something with me. She glanced at the table, at the cracked wooden bowl. May I keep it? She asked. As a reminder that kindness exists even in the smallest things, that a human with nothing gave everything to an enemy. I looked at the bowl, the one my father had used every day, the one that had survived winters and loss. It was worthless to anyone else, but to her, it meant something. Take it, I said. She picked it up carefully, then she stepped closer, her voice low enough that only I could hear. You saved a queen, Rivenmar. But more than that, you saved Vesha. I will not forget. Before I could respond, she turned and walked out. The 3 orcs fell in around her like a living wall. Tharok shot me one last glare, but said nothing. They vanished into the trees, their footprints already filling with fresh snow. The cabin, the blankets lay crumpled on the floor where she'd slept, and the space where the bowl had sat felt empty. I sat down hard on the chair, staring at the hearth. A queen. I'd shared stew with a queen. Let her sleep under my roof. Laughed with her like she was just Vesha. And now she was gone. The silence pressed in, heavier than any blizzard. I didn't know if I'd ever see her again. But one thing was certain. The green-skinned stranger I'd pulled from the ice had changed everything. And the cracked bowl was no longer on my table. 3 days after they left, Marta showed up like she always did. With a loaf of hard bread and a barrage of questions, she plunked herself down on my only chair like she owned it, her sharp eyes scanning the cabin as if she could smell the change in the air. You're quieter than usual, she said, squinting at me. The kind of quiet that means you're hiding something. Nothing, I replied, stirring the fire to avoid her gaze. There's something, she declared, crossing her arms. I can tell. I didn't tell her. Some stories aren't meant to be sliced open like bread. They break too easily. I went back to my old rhythm, chopping wood, setting traps, patching the roof, surviving the tail end of winter. But every night, my eyes drifted to the shelf where the bowl used to sit, and I'd wonder, what does a queen do with a cracked wooden bowl not worth a copper? Does she keep it on a golden table in some mountain hall, or toss it aside once she's back on her throne? 2 months passed. Winter faded slow, snow turning to mud underfoot. The forest remembered how to sprout green shoots. That's when I saw the shadow in the eastern woods. My hand went to the axe instinctively, then paused. It was the younger warrior from before, the one with fewer scars, less menace in his stance. He carried a cloth bundle, stopping a respectful distance from the cabin. Human Riven, he said, using my name like a title. The queen sends me. I didn't rush forward. I stood in the doorway, close enough to the fire, far enough not to spark misunderstanding. He held out the bundle. For you. Inside was a bowl carved from white stone, seamless from a single block, smooth and elegant, the rim etched with orc runes circling like a vow. I knew at a glance it was worth more than my entire cabin. And nestled inside the stone bowl, wrapped safe, was my cracked wooden bowl, returned. I stood frozen for a beat. Tucked beside it was a small scrap of paper, common tongue written careful, like someone unused to the letters but determined. One bowl for what you gave me. Both are valuable. Both are real. No signature. Didn't need one. The young warrior watched me, then spoke like finishing a duty. The queen mentions you in council. When elders demand we keep the old hatreds like law, she speaks of a human who saved an enemy because it was right. It makes them uncomfortable. Good, I said, my voice rough. He nodded, hesitating. I looked at the 2 bowls, one stone, one wood, one beautiful, one ugly. And in that moment, I understood Value isn't in the material, but in what two people pour into it. "Tell the queen," I said to the young warrior, "that I remember too." He flashed a quick smile, brief, showing a hint of tusk, then turned back into the woods, vanishing like the others. That night, I cooked stew. Still bad as ever. I ate from the white stone one I placed on the shelf above the hearth, where it caught the firelight and reminded me that impossible things happen sometimes. That enemies can share a fire without burning each other. Outside, spring came slow but sure. Ice began to melt. In the forest, in the lake, and somewhere deeper, where no one sees right away, between human lands and the mountains of Iron Peak. Just knowing that up north, a queen might keep a cracked wooden bowl on her golden table, and when someone asks why, she'll remember a small cabin, a bad stew, and a young man who chose to save instead of turn